Hello! Welcome back to Drunk Storytime with Quefish. I'm starting to come down. But so I did the first little bottle of plum wine, and then I did the big bottle of plum wine. I am not busting into the pomegranate wine because that's for next week. And we're all on quarantine, so I gotta kind of ration it. So this next one is not Good Omens themed, but it is from Brianna in the Thirsty Throat Spacklers, aka Plantdaddy. They, he. Okay, I will do my absolute best to remember that. Plantdaddy sent me something called generic cishet bdsm erotica, which is possibly the number one best story title I've ever seen, other than like some of mine, which is just 1, 2, and 3. So this is the best story title ever created. Generic cishet bdsm erotica .doc. So, and this is from Plantdaddy on the Spacklers server. Okay. She was bound tightly, perfectly, her lightly tanned skin shining with a thin sheen of perspiration. Her eyes were closed in gentle bliss, her chest rising and falling rapidly. His large and strong hands caressed her inner thigh gently, causing her to shudder, the slightest of touches sending shockwaves through her highly sensitized body. It sounds like a Harlequin romance. He'd been keeping her on the edge for hours now, occasionally letting her come down, only to build right back up again. Desperately, she would moan and writhe, pleading, demanding. Every curse that fell from her lips was met with a sharp spank between her damp thighs, and each time his hand would come away wet. Of course, he would lift it to her... Oh, he didn't flick. Of course, he would lift it to her mouth for her to clean. She would moan only more as she licked her own wetness off his hand, nipping slightly at his skin. He knew, of course, that she was trying to goad him, trying to make him punish her. The little brat loved it. She loved the pain, the denial, the complete absence of control. She was his entirely. She whined when he did spank her, and even allowed her when he didn't, or dared to do so lightly. He knew that at this point, a hard enough spank would send her over the edge. Her body was shaking with need. As he knelt, chuckling quietly, she whimpered, pulling at her bonds, biting her lip, restrained on a St. Andrew's cross. She was perfectly and totally accessible, and completely trapped. His cock strained against his jeans, desperate to be inside her. She was so beautiful like this, tied up for his pleasure, her skin covered in various marks, some of which would bruise, at least lightly. Gently, he blows across her wet cunt, and the poor slut all but screams with desperation, trying desperately to buck her hips towards him. Above her head, her hands clench into fists, her eyes tightly shut, as if maybe she concentrated it would work. Another soft chuckle emanates from his lips, right against her aching cunt, and her entire body. Another soft chuckle emanates from his lips, right against her aching cunt, and her entire body shudders. Perfect. She was so desperate. Very, Very gently, he runs his tongue across her clit, delighting in her whimpers and moans, her words barely audible now. She cusses and whines, to which he responds with a sharp bite on her thigh, leaving another mark among many. Whining only more, her toes curl, her body arcing towards him as best she could, while he pleases himself with making hickeys on her thigh and hip. Surprising her, he quickly plunges 2 fingers inside her, relishing her soft scream. As he curls her fingers against her G-spot, he reminds her that she better not dare come. Simply laughing at her desperate whimpers, he slowly moves his hand, feeling her body tense up around him. Her pleads become even more desperate, declarations that she simply can't hold on. He keeps pushing her, grinding his thumb against her clit as he fingers her. As he feels her body begin to shudder, he pulls his hand away completely, licking at her hip. For a few moments, he lets her whine and struggle, cursing loudly at him, along with hissing and growling. Good Lord. When he's had enough of her insolence, he stands, tightly grabbing her hair and commanding her to meet his gaze. When her eyes slowly open, he stares down at her with a smug glance, and more than a hint of a smirk on his lips as he chastises her for her behavior. She really was such a brat. All the more fun for him, he supposed. He got to break her, work for her submission to him. It was so cute how she fought, struggled, resisted. He knew she loved it, wanted it, craved it. He just had to make her admit it. He gently coaxed her, teasing her as he let go of her hair, his fingers running maddening circles over her neck and shoulder and down her chest, telling her just to admit how much she loved it, how much she craved it. The little brat kept whining, denying him, denying herself. His fingers kept tracing over her skin, his eyes on hers, his free hand bringing her gaze back to his every time she looks away. After really not all that long, she caved, crying out how much she loved it, wanted it, needed him. He chuckled, rewarding her with a deep, passionate kiss as he slowly unzipped his jeans, freeing his cock. A soft moan erupts from both of them as he gently grinds against her, coating himself in her wetness so quickly. It was almost a struggle to not just slip in. He teased her only more, making her beg for it, for him. She did, loudly and desperately. No longer did she make her, albeit adorable, attempts to demand what she wanted, simply begging. Even as he thrust her full length inside her, she still begged, so close. He felt her tighten and gently rubbed his thumb against her clit, kissing her as he whispered what she most wanted to hear. He gave her permission to come, and she did. Screaming into the kiss, her cunt squeezing and convulsing around him so tightly he almost came himself. Her body shook, and he sped up, drawing her orgasm out longer. Held up only by her bonds on the cross, she quietly moans, her eyes closed and watery, her mouth open in pleasure. Her face is flushed, her cheeks bright red. Her hair is wild around her head, and her chest rises and falls rapidly. He looks similar as he thrusts in and out of her faster and faster and harder, slamming his hips into hers. They'd have bruises, but it'd be worth it. It was already worth it. Seeing the pure ecstasy on her face was making it so hard for him to hold back, but he could feel her building up again, and lowered his head to her neck. His action was met with delightful little moans as she writhed helplessly beneath him, pleasure building to a blinding crescendo. As yet another orgasm crashes over her, he lets his free, and they both moan in unison, his head buried in her neck as he buries his cock deep inside her, coming hard. It takes a few minutes for them to both slowly come down off the high, his body leaning slightly against hers all but limp against the cross. Slowly he stands, pecking her lips softly, both breathing heavily. Dampening a washcloth from the sink, he returns to her, gently washing her down before untying her and carrying his sleepy little brat to bed, where they both curl up and sleep in pleasured bliss. That wasn't quite humor porn, but I understand why. Because that was generic cishet BDSM erotica. That could be in literally every single Harlequin romance ever. And I understand it. And it was really good. It is. It is, in fact, very good. So, yes. So, thank you very much, Brianna. That was awesome. And thank you so much for letting me read it. And I feel bad because some other people ask me to read, but I don't actually get permission from the writer, and I kind of feel bad about that. But this was very good. And as I said at the beginning, this was not Good Omens, but it was still very good. It was generic. It was just he and she. And it was very good. So, unfortunately, I don't have a link to this one. This one was specifically just sent to me. So I don't have a link to this one, but I'll link you the wine that I was drinking. I don't know if you care about that though. So thank you very much for letting me read it, for sending it to me. And thank you everybody for watching and or listening. And I'll see you next time.